It's time for the Everyman, where real man talk.
Let's go. Time to grind, get inside your mind. Yeah, we working overtime. That's the only way to climb. We gon' make it in our prime. Signing on the dotted line, cashing checks left and right. That's the way I'm living life.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Everyman. Tonight is episode 8, and we have another special guest. Tonight we are joined by Nathan Jones, the clinical director of the London Centre for Addictions. Nathan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm very well, thanks, Lewis. Very well, thanks for inviting me.
No, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on. I know addiction is a topic that we have mentioned briefly on other podcasts that we've done so far, and it's something that we've had people reach out to us regarding other episodes around a topic that they are really looking forward to hearing us discuss, but equally probably find out a little bit more information. Before we get into the topic, I have to introduce a very new host to us on the Everyman podcast. We have Mr. Stephen James Dixon to anyone on LinkedIn, but to me, I know him as my sister's husband and James Dixon. How are you doing tonight, James?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Lewis. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing really well, thanks, mate. I promise we will be gentle. We will not have your life too much, but I can't promise for all regular listeners that Ethan won't.
I know. I was just about to say that I didn't realize it was your sister's husband's dog's nephew. You know what I mean? And I like how you got a bigger intro than my actual guest. You've not shut up about for all of last week and all this weekend. You know what I mean?
Thanks,
Sorry about that, Nathan. We'll give you a better intro and then outro. Don't worry.
Go on, you go first, then, Ethan. You give the intro.
Oh, it's pointless, mate. I'm just a good-looking man. That's all. I'm just a good-looking man.
Not anymore.
Oh, right, okay. I see how it is.
Different episode, same crack. Is that what it is?
Pretty much. I just want to stress as well, because I've had a few complaints about Joby being put on a ban for 2 weeks, or now, which is several weeks. Just let everyone know an update. Joby's actually an executive producer who also comes on the show, has a guest spot. But Joby's integral to our team. You know, he's one of our good pals. He does a lot for us and a lot for the lads. So I just want to give him a shout out and just let people know he's still involved. He is still on a talking ban at the moment, but he's still just working in the background as well. We'll get that out of the way before having more here. But yeah, over to you, Nathan and Lewis. I'll let you crack on with your...
Fantastic. Thanks, Ethan. So, Nathan, obviously you do some incredible work. You're not only the director of the London Centre for Addiction, you're also the founder. So before we touch or get into that bit of work, because a big thing that we discuss on the podcast is people and the things they do now, there's always a much bigger purpose to why they do that. And that comes from probably your background, your experiences in your life, especially to do something around something so emotive as addiction and the impact that has in people's lives. So I'd be interested to understand, firstly, what made you get into that sort of work and why you think it's so important.
Okay, thank you. So I have a checkered past with alcohol, with my substances and behavioural addictions. And I just remember when I was in residential treatment thinking that I'd just love to be able to do what the therapists were doing for me. They were absolutely fantastic. And it was just from that day, I just really thought I just wanted to turn the worst thing in my life that had happened, in residential rehab at 28, and lost all my friends, bankrupt, caught drink driving, the list is endless. And I just wanted to try to turn it into a positive to be able to, help people who were in a similar position. So then left rehab ultimately. I had my customary relapse that people have when they leave rehab. Thought I could do it on my own. Found out I couldn't. And having a relapse with a head full of recovery and therapy and a body full of drugs just didn't work. It was awful. It really was. But then that was the best thing that happened to me. So that was May the 3rd, 2013. I had my last sort of drink and drug. So it's coming up to 10 years. And since then, I just went to college, got my degree in counselling, then went and did a postgraduate diploma, now doing a PhD. So it's sort of full circle, really. Yeah. So it's just my own lived experience, because I know how hard it is to ask for help and, you know, speak about your mental health, as you guys have touched upon. So yeah, it's born out of my own lived experience.
No, that sounds truly inspiring, actually, because for example, we are a young group of lads. Generally, some of us think we're younger than we are, Ethan, and we, as a group of friends, I think we're in the Northeast. For example, you've touched on drink and drugs there. There's such a heavy drinking culture in the Northeast, and I've also seen a rise in the drug culture in the Northeast. And I think it's because it's so accessible within groups of men. The social thing we all do is go out on the drink. We generally don't talk about our emotions. We will go to the pub, drink 10, 15 pints, whatever, to forget how we are really feeling about the things that are really stressing us out. And I think before we go into probably a little bit, as an onion, we'll peel some of your layers a little bit on your story. I think it's, for me, sitting here as someone who has had struggles with various things in my own life, I do find it honestly really inspiring that you've gone from being in a position where you were 10 years ago, where, as you say, you were, and you still described yourself as in recovery today, but to using that lived experience, bad experience, as something to fuel you to do something really powerful and impactful for other people. So huge hats off. Oh, again, my hat, Ethan, reference episode there. If I had one, I would take it off to you.
Oh, thank you. Really, and it's just nice to be able to speak to, chap 24. When I was 24, I was just causing mayhem, just using continuously, and it's just great if my story helps just one person, that then the job's done. But I think it really can, really resonate, especially with my using towards the end. I was stealing off friends, family, and it wasn't nice. It's completely taken hold of me, and it's just like you say, it's a privilege to be in this position, from being on the other side, especially when I'm giving therapy and somebody's had a relapse. They know that I understand without even saying anything. So it's the only job, really. It helps to have had a bit of a checkered past. Yeah.
But I think that's also probably what makes you really good at your job. The fact that you're not just coming at it from the academic or the textbook way. You can get on a real human level with someone and say, look, I've been in your shoes. I understand how you're feeling. And the biggest thing that I've seen and probably felt personally when I've struggled with something is you feel like you're the worst person in the world for what you've done. And you think like you're the first person in the world to have ever done it. And as you say around, you stole from family and friends, and that's something obviously you will never encourage anyone to do. But equally, you're not the first and you won't be the last person to do it. So that means that there's a wider problem than just that individual. There's an illness through their addiction that is preventing them from being able to make rational decisions.
Most definitely. And there's a lot of theories about addiction. So we've got the disease model where people say it's a disease or choice, it's a person's choice. But what I believe it is rooted, not all addictions rooted in trauma. I would say 95% that I see, I can only speak for myself, 95% of the clients we see, they've had horrific childhoods, but not just when we say trauma. Sometimes a client will come in and say, well, I've not been sexually abused. I've not been beaten. I was fed. I was clothed. I had a roof over my head. But it can be things such as bullying. It could be critical parents. It can be, a sibling being favored over you. It could be your dad not paying you enough attention. There's so many things that can trigger off this wound within us. And again, going into the work that I do with the inner child therapy, we believe that it is childhood pain points that drive addictive behavior. Most definitely. Not always. I always like to caveat that, because some professionals will pull me up on that. So it really is. It tends to be a response to human suffering, addiction. Really does.
Nathan, just a quick one there. What you're mentioning, I've read your article, which I know Lewis mentioned, we're going to go in and peel the onion down. But it's so refreshing, the fact that you're saying there a lot of past experiences have such an impact on our future and where we are now, and this, whether you want to label it a disease or everyone puts it a certain way. But are there any ways you can get out of this sort of rut? Say if you're in this abusive rut, or the trauma still is sort of, you're struggling with the trauma even today now with a parent, say for example, and you want to try get out of it. How would you break that vicious cycle? How would you put the first step forward and identify the issue and get beyond it? If you don't mind me asking.
No, not at all. The first step, Ethan, would be to, obviously it would be engage with therapy and find somebody who is sort of experienced in, I don't know if you've heard of psychodynamic therapy, where it looks at the unconscious, how our unconscious plays out in our adult behavior. So it would be to see, a therapist, maybe skilled in inner child work or psychodynamic, because what tends to happen is there will be an emotional wound that's happened within childhood, but on a daily basis, that could be triggered. So if there is example of say parents rejected you as a child, say your father left, then if you were rejected on your day-to-day life, then that would awaken or awoke that inner child within, and then it would, manifest in that trauma would just come out. So the key thing is to first, like you say, recognize that you are struggling with these behaviors, and the way to break it is not just through behavior change. It would be to really drill into the weeds to find out what are these specific instances that keep driving that behavior. So awareness is the first point, because once we're aware, then we can bring the unconscious into consciousness, and then we can start making sense of it and begin to heal. That's what I would say.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. It sounds quite intense, like getting over that hurdle. But I mean, obviously, to get up that hill and come back down the other side, and like Lewis said earlier, you've turned your life around. Coming up 10 years is absolutely phenomenal. And the thing to remember, I think, from what there's people in my life that have struggled with addiction. Obviously, I won't name names. They've got their own stories to tell, but like you said, it's a continuous journey. It's day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, second by second. It's not similar to my journey with weight. It's never good. There's no end game. There's no day where you can be, I'm cured, or I'm skinny, or I'm not going to drink again. It is day by day, and to go almost 10 years, it's absolutely phenomenal, mate. I'll take my Lewis Vines hat off to you.
Proverbial hat.
Proverbial hat, as he says.
I appreciate that. There's a saying in sort of 12-step groups that essentially the addict's just doing press-ups, just waiting for a chink in the armour. And like you say, as soon as we think we're cured, then we start moving backwards, and then inevitably, we relapse. So yeah, it's a horrible disorder. It really is, and it affects millions and millions of people. But one disorder really that goes under the radar: pornography addiction. And most of my clients come in with porn addiction, and the effect that has on their neurological self, the physiological, legal ramifications when it strays into taboo
underage.
I feel it's a very I think there's many millions of people will be struggling with this addiction because of the accessibility of it. I think that's something I would wanted to highlight, is that especially sort of porn addiction is the one, most definitely.
Yeah,
as in the most dangerous that you've seen.
It's the most prevalent, I would say, that I've seen, especially as well with cocaine addicts. You find that there's always there tends to be a compulsive sexual behavior linked in. But I think with pornography addiction, it's again, the average age people are watching now is 10. So I'll give you an example. Chap I was working with, he had a good upbringing, no trauma, You know, he was, you know, really good upbringing, had lots of friends. He used to play a lot of sport. He was connected. Started watching it at 10. By 13, he was a daily user. By 16, he failed all his exams because he couldn't sleep, because he was just up all night. Then he went to university, got his first girlfriend. But he couldn't perform because he had porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Do you want me to explain a bit what that is in terms of how it happens?
Yeah, please.
So what tends to happen there is, because an individual's been watching pornography for so long, they rewire their sexual arousal template. So they are essentially conditioning themselves to be aroused under certain circumstances, being alone in front of a screen, 10 to 20 tabs open at a time, you know, flicking from video to video. And what that does, it just trains the brain to be aroused just to, you know, to a screen. So essentially bonding to a screen. So when, you know, a real woman comes along, can't compete with, you know, the supernormal stimuli and effects of porn. So that is, so the ultimate, the end goal then is porn-induced erectile dysfunction. And it took the chap I was working with about 9 months to return back to his normal state because he'd been watching it for so long. But with him, it escalated, unfortunately. He wouldn't reach out because of the stigma, shame and guilt that he felt.
Yeah, I get that.
And he actually said to me that if it was alcohol or gambling or drugs, he'd have told someone. But he felt so sort of shameful that he strayed into the illegal stuff, and he got the knock at the door from the police, and he put on the offenders register. And it's quite common that I see that in practice, where they downloading, you know, videos, and unknowingly to them there's illegal content in there.
That's insane. I mean, sorry, Lou. It just takes me back to something there you've said. I think it coincides a lot with how available it is now compared to back in the day. So there's a comedian, I don't know if people have heard him, called Theo Von, and he made a joke, and I know it's a joke and a really serious matter, but he made a joke when he was younger. They would watch like these dodgy channels on his dad's TV at like past midnight. You'd maybe see black and white fuzz, and you might see the occasional boob come on the screen, and you know, something like that. Now, you know, you walk down, you can open your phone, and within, like you say, within 10 seconds, you can have 20 tabs open, different pornographic sort of experiences, and different. There's such a range as well. You know, it's just insane. So I can totally get that, and it's just insane what you're saying there. 10 years old, like, you should be outside playing football with your mates.
Exactly, yeah.
You know what I mean? You should be making memories, not glued to a phone.
But do you not think it's not even necessarily just porn, like going on a porn site? We've all... So I've got rid of Instagram, for example. You go on Instagram, and even without searching for any girls in bikinis, there are girls in bikinis. And the algorithm is built where, again, as a man, you may have a week a day where you look at said video at girl in bikini, and then your timeline, I don't know if it's your timeline or I don't know what that's called, that like search bit where your suggested videos or whatever it is, that's then full of that type of content. But equally, children nowadays, so when we were growing up, we're 30, social media wasn't a thing, and having access to that type of content wasn't readily available. So I can only see the pornographic or sexual addiction to sexual type content only getting worse because it's becoming more and more readily available. And that's concerning, isn't it?
It's scary. And again, caveat this: most people can watch it and it won't affect them. But but you know, working on the front line, seeing people, you know, using it daily basis, they're missing work, their relationships are in turmoil, they're spending hundreds of pounds on live sex shows or, you know, webcams. They're the people who I really want to help, but I do think, like you say, it's so readily available. I feel there should be education in schools around it massively, because we're educated on smoking, gambling now, you see it everywhere, dangers of drinking, drugs, self-explanatory. But I think with porn, because it's so sort of shameful and taboo. No one really wants to talk about it, do they? No, but it's it's scary to see what can happen. You know, if
Yeah.
it really gets hold. And again, it's the different. There's a question coming.
I think Job's just saying a lot of it is chasing the next high with porn addiction.
Oh,
The normal stuff becomes boring, and
Yeah.
they look for the next thing that turns into worse and worse till it gets to a taboo point.
that's true.
Yeah, that's a
it's
really, really true point there, Joby.
It's that escalation where it starts at the vanilla stuff and then they move on to various genres. It's quite
Yeah.
taboo, and then it's just like, and the research has shown as well that it affects the brain similar to cocaine as well, which says it all, really, doesn't it? Especially if you're combining cocaine with porn, with a lot of people do. It's I think it's an addiction that flies under the radar a lot of the time because billion-dollar industry, people don't really want to kick up.
Don't want to stop it.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. I think what I've touched upon there, and it's something that I've seen as a growing problem within society, is probably addiction to your phone. So I see how many people have we seen parents that they're out with their kids and they're not looking at the kids, they're not talking to their kids, they're sat playing on their phone, or you could be around your mates. There's even times as a group of mates we could be sat together and half the group are just sat on their phone. But who are you messaging when? Oh, I'm just messaging one of the lads. Well, the lads are here and we're having a bit of banter, or you sat with your partner and I think we're all guilty of it, but I'm definitely guilty of it. Where I'll just sit playing a game on my phone or whatever, and it's just really, it feels unhealthy. I like the fact that phones have that. Do you know how when it comes up with you've used your phone for X amount of hours this
screen
week?
time.
Yeah, screen time.
I look at it sometimes and I think, oh my, I'm literally wasting my life, and I'll go through that almost like a detox where I'm like, withdraw myself from my phone, delete certain apps, wherever I'm using the most. Do I need to use it? No. Cleanse myself. But then you almost come back to it again. You fall into some bad habits of, I'll download that game again because it passes the time or whatever.
It's scary again because each time you reach for your phone and you see maybe a like or a notification, you get that little shot of dopamine.
Yeah.
And then you go again. Not to the same extent or the high as cocaine, but it's more prolonged in the case of, you just keep reaching and reaching and reaching. The best place that I always look is on the tube in London. Everyone is head down, phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's but I think we're all guilty of it though, aren't we? So
Lewis is definitely guilty of it. And before we move on sections, I just want to say when Lewis was getting with his Ben's man, we all went away on holiday to Zante. And I just want to say, I've never known someone 10 years ago. I've never known someone come on a lad's holiday and not leave their phone out of their hands. He was literally texting her, and I can't even remember him leaving his phone. We're in a club, dancing, raving. He was texting her. You know what I mean? This is 10 years ago, so Lewis is definitely guilty of that.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm not. Thanks, mate. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to say I'm not. It's something that I feel like I have quite an addictive personality, or the ability to get obsessed with something. So if it's a game, so I don't play video games and stuff like on the PlayStation or anymore, because I would find if I logged on, I would sit and play it for 10 hours.
Yeah.
I couldn't just go, right, I'm off it or whatever. So I've tried to just sort of separate myself from the things that potentially could be an issue. But then it also has benefits in my life. The fact that I can become quite obsessive about things. So for work, for example, if I'm working on a project, I can do really good work because my brain just thinks about it all the time. It thinks, okay, how can I improve it? What can we do? What's the risk? What's the benefit? And if I do these actions, and my brain, because it's thinking about that stuff so much, it probably allows me to be hyper focused on it.
Yeah.
But then it has problems, and I was speaking to Ethan about this fairly recently, and Christian actually, around how that has further impacts on my life because I'm just out of balance. I go all in on something, and then if I go all in on work, it drops friends, family, health, training, whatever. So there's definitely some sort of issue there in my brain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, you talk about obsession there. It's a main reason I began drinking was I now know I've had OCD since I was 8 or 9, and I think it's quite a trait of people with addictions. It's that overactive in your brain. That's why I started drinking, just to quiet the brain. You know, the obsessive thoughts that used to come really bad when I was doing my GCSEs, and that was in, when would that have been? Year 2000, and I don't even think that there was any literature out about OCD then. There was no talk of mental health, definitely not. So it was, that was a huge reason. I think that, you know, maybe a lot of people, I think, turn to drink just to quieten the mind, because those obsessive thoughts. I think sometimes when people say I've got a bit of OCD, I think it really, you know, it's really quite demeaning to people who have OCD, because they're torturous, the intrusive thoughts that, as you can attest to, and other people who've, you know, had OCD. It's it's a horrible condition, it really is.
Yeah. No,
I like to go back to sorry, Lewis. When you sit on the tube and you just look and everyone's on their phone, no one's really sociable these days. They're all on social media where it's all fake, it's not real. And then the only time people are sociable, or the majority of people, is if they're with their friends who they already know, or they're out and they're getting pissed. And then that brings out a different side to them, but it's not really them, it's the drink that's making them like that. So you don't really see people going out and making new friends as much as they used to.
No, it's a good point. And you'd think we'd be more connected. You know, now we're more connected than ever, aren't we? We can, you know, email people across the world and keep in contact. But I think as a society, we've become much more insular now. And I think, you know, it's quite sad, really. But this is where these types of addictions are going to flourish, because people they don't know how to communicate. I think that's key. You know, if you're watching porn at 10 years of age, you're not going to want to go to the cinema with your mates on a Friday night. You'd rather just lock yourself away in your room, or play Fortnite all night, or watch online porn, or, you know, gambling's another one. You know, these online casinos, and scary. I think this is where addiction, the proliferation, is going to really, you know, it's going to really find a way into how society is at the moment, because it always gives you what you need until it doesn't.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, Nathan, So James, you keep going.
I think with us all also being so addicted to our phones, and then being able to get all of them addicting things from your phone, they're going to start becoming more popular, and a lot more people are going to start suffering from them. For example, drugs, that you've got to go out and you've got to go and get them, or you've got to get the money to go and get them. Whereas these gambling sites or the porn, it's literally just a click away. You know, you don't have to go far at all.
No,
you don't have to go anywhere.
And I think that's their key. It's all around that instant gratification. It's all around that ease of accessibility. It's about removing the barriers. So the everything I've read and understand to date around addiction and overcoming it and battling it is the key is to increase your time to decision making. So from an impulsive act to time, rational thought, I'm not going to make that decision. But because, as you're suggesting there, James, everything's becoming so instant, and our brain, so addiction controls your mind, and it's like a constant beacon in your mind. It then, with the ability to access it on your phone, for example, or whatever, it stops us being able to be in control of our own mind and stop the addiction. And I think that's where that's why I mentioned the addicted to your phone piece. I think there's a huge problem with phones. This is really awkward because I actually work for a mobile phone company. But in terms of how people believe and treat their phone, as in it's your social life, it's your entertainment, it's your thing to do when you're bored. That's an issue where people need to step away from that false reality of the digital world and come back into the real world, where true happiness, true enjoyment, fulfillment, love, personal really exists, not this fake virtual reality that is essentially what it feels like, trying to grab you and pull you to the next trend or the next thing to grab your attention. And it's feeding that inability for people to find probably that inner peace, because you're always being pushed to look at something. And how many people today do we all know who struggle just doing nothing? I personally really struggle just sitting there in my own thoughts doing nothing, and that's probably because I spend maybe a bit too much time on my phone, where everything's so instant, and if I want something or I want to do something, it's there for me to have or do straight away.
Yeah, I think we're primed for instant gratification. That's what we're primed for now, and this, it's just coming at us, left, right, and center. But with instant gratification, always long-term loss. That's the trade-off. If you take it, there will be that long-term loss. And I say to clients, you only have to look at the things that you've achieved in your life that really mean something. And it could be an academic, it could be being a parent, it could be passing your driving test. Anything which really means something and it's got value, they tend to be the things that are healthy for us, because, invariably what goes up comes straight back down. And, that's the thing I would say to clients: look at the trade-off, and it is about really looking, like you say, especially with these addictions on phones, with, again, look at porn and gambling and the two. I always say to clients, this is my opinion, you won't be able to stop this addiction if you have unrestricted access on your phone. So there's a website software blocker that I always recommend, because if you don't put something on your phone, it's like an alcoholic walking around with a flask of whiskey in his pocket. You're not going to touch it. It's just there in case he needs it. Because if there's no barrier, the cycle needs to be broken. And the only way, when you're quite far gone in your addiction, is to put something in place, just to give yourself, as you said, Lewis, that minute or two to think, do I want to do this? Because a lot of people with an addiction, they'll be arguing with themselves. Shall I do it? I don't want to. Shall I? They're quite ambivalent. And it's that cognitive dissonance that they feel, that they just then go for the phone because the access is there. But if there's no access, it makes it harder for them. So it's really about finding, in the early days, it's not a silver bullet, but it really does help. Like I'd say to an alcoholic, don't go to a pub. It's a similar, or a cocaine addict, don't go to your dealer's house. It's all about trying to help people give themselves that time to make that right choice, because it's so hard. Because how many times, as we've said, do we go for our phone on a daily basis and we don't even know why we're doing it? We've just been conditioned to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Nope. So I read your article on the Metro, and there was one part where you were going to take a break from your rehab, and your counsellor had said, maybe you need some more pain. So I read that instantly. I thought it was pretty deep, but you didn't get it straight away, did you?
No.
Only when you'd relapsed, that's when you realised.
Yeah, I was early days full of ego, arrogant, selfish, self-centered, thought I could do it on my own, thought I wasn't like, the rest of the people. I didn't drink every day, so I'm not an alcoholic, didn't use every day. But when I did use, I'd spend thousands of pounds, but denial, I'd put that to one side. But like that, my therapist said, you need more pain. I didn't really understand what she meant. But then a couple of months later, I'd stopped doing what got me well. And then I relapsed, and it was, oh God, I can't put into words the pain. It was ended up in, miles away from home, causing chaos. And then, it was not nice. But that was the end of that relapse, was sort of May the 3rd, 10 years ago. So that was the last time I used. So if I hadn't have done that, I don't think I'd be here today. So I'm glad it happened in a way.
Yeah.
But it was, it wasn't nice, that awful feeling.
Nathan, just a quick one, mate. Obviously, James has touched on it there. That obviously there was an article which we've read, and it is extremely refreshing and honest and open.
Yeah.
You don't hold any punches, mate. So it's a fabulous article. I don't think I've got the bollocks to say some of the stuff you said. I mean, would you mind just touching on the article and telling a little bit of your story, Because I know from the article, was it 15 when he started having your first drink at a football event? Yeah.
Yeah,
Would
15.
you mind starting there and going through with us?
Yeah, so 15, where it was a football event, and I think I was excited because I'd won Player of the Year, got the little trophy. Walking home, fell through a bus stop. That was the beginning. Straight through, cut my arm. But I just love the feeling. When you have that first drink, that calmed the nerves, calmed the mind, gives you the confidence.
Feel like you're Superman.
Yeah, bulletproof. So so 15. Then it didn't really become it wasn't problematic. I'd sort of use occasionally, but then when I turned 18, that started to creep back in more because I looked quite young, so I'd struggle to get in at pubs, etc. So I was quite a late developer in terms of the drink. But then when I turned 19, I always remember the date. It was October the 18th, 2001, when I first tried Coke. And that first time I took it, I'll never ever forget that. I think it's as if I just felt, this was what I was looking for all my life. It squashed all that pain of my parents' divorce, squashed all the pain of, just living, and it just transported me into another dimension. And at 19, I just still remember it clear as day, that buzz it gave me. And I think from that day, it just awoken a beast in me. And then ever since then, sort of in my 20s, it really started to get a hold then. So in my 20s. Do you want me to go through a bit of a timeline? Or do you want to stop and ask me questions?
Please.
No, that's fine. I was just distracted by Joe putting the article on 10 minutes after I'd mentioned it. So thanks for that, Christian, Joe. I appreciate it, mate. Thank you. Sorry about that, Nathan.
It's all right. So like I say, so I was holding down a decent job. I was working at the local council, local government, playing football weekends, got into a long-term relationship, and things were going okay, sort of going steady. Planned to get married. But over the years, in my mid-20s, the binges were becoming shorter. And I was going out and I was spending hundreds of pounds. And my outgoings compared to my wages, they were like that. And I was racking up debt after debt, credit card. My classic one would be get a credit card, rack it up, get another one, transfer the balance, rack it up again, keep moving around. My dad bailed me out 20 grand when I was 21. But I just thought that was just did it again. Yeah, enabled me in a way. And then carried on. And then when I got to sort of say 24, 25, the partner I was with at the time, then she just had enough, completely said the wedding's off, just go away. She'd found out I was using, and I don't blame her, to be honest. I was an idiot at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was many a time I'd take so much I could feel my heart pounding, sort of palpitations, and it was just not turning into a nice person, especially then. I got my own place as well. There was one night I went out, all my other friends had gone home, but then I would like to get other people in the early hours, and I was in my house. It was like a drugs den. There's about 15 people there, and I didn't know one of them. But I think anyone who's a drug addict will tell you they'd rather be with someone than no one. So you sort of take people hostage in a way. And that was probably sort of the downslide, because I was then using drugs sort of, all day Saturday, then into Sunday, then Monday, going to work after three days bender, spending money I didn't have, had to leave there, go back to my mum's. Then the drink driving incident, which to this day, I'm so grateful I didn't hurt anyone. Yeah. Driving through my village at, it must have been 7:00 at night, 70 miles per hour, in blackout. I think the CCTV caught it, what I was doing. Pulled into the local pub, nearly ran over some people on a table, got out of the pub. Quite rightly, a guy punched me, broke my nose. Then my dad was there, my brother, police turned up. Oh, I'll never forget that feeling. Being in the back of the car, being driven away to, and then banned from driving, community service. But it still wasn't enough for me to stop using. I was using again the week after. Just shows the madness of addiction. Even in that moment, nearly could have lost my job. Don't know how I didn't. And yeah, it was, but that still wasn't enough. Still another 2 years after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That, because you hear that story and it literally sounds like, how does it get any worse than that? From alcohol and drugs, other than losing your job, losing your home. And did it take you to lose everything for you to realize, okay, I'm at my lowest?
Let me think. What's the timeline? Where are we? So then it was, I'd got banned from driving, but then I'd just carried on. You know, I'd get paid, but then I'd spend all my wages in the weekend. So I'd go through, you know, a couple of thousand in the weekend. Feel like a king on the Friday, and then a pauper on the Sunday. Just nothing left
for the rest of the month.
Oh yeah, then mum bailing me out, etc. But I think that the turning point for me came when I'd ended up in Manchester, not far from where I live, spent all my money again, and I was sat in this train station in Piccadilly, and I just didn't want to live or die. It was just, I just didn't want to. It was just an awful feeling. And even on
you
the
didn't
train,
want to live or die. You were just in like a state of nothingness.
It was horrible. It was just a state of just felt numb. And from that day forward, I went home, and my mum said, you know, you need to get some help. And then they took me to the doctors, and then luckily I went into treatment from there. But yeah, but before then, like I alluded to earlier, I was stealing from friends, stealing from parents, using credit cards, taking loans out. Got to a place I'd never think I would, but when you're desperate to feed the addiction, you know, it was it's very, very sad times. But during that period as well, I was so arrogant. I started using sunbeds a lot. I was using sunbeds for 50 minutes a week. Had a hell of a suntan, but it wasn't doing me any good. So yeah, I think that was a mild again, using something else to change how I felt. If it's drinking, if it's drugs, if it's sunbeds, even designer clothes. I used to, you know, spend all this money on designer clothes, but it was all on credit cards. And it was, I used to think I was some sort of football hooligan who'd never had a fight in his life. But it's just
except that one punch in the pub.
Yeah, which really knocked me out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. But on a serious note, it was that time was sort of in Piccadilly was the time when I just thought, I've got to do something now because this can't go on. I think the pain of staying the same was, you know, I just couldn't do it. So I just needed to change.
So do you know when you're talking about that and you say you weren't sure if you wanted, you neither wanted to be here or not, did you ever get to the stage of feeling suicidal and that this just isn't worth it anymore? Or was your mentality of, I just can't do this anymore?
Yeah, I think it was my ego was too big. It was as if I just thought, I'll be okay, my mum will just bail me out. I used to threaten I'd kill myself to my mum, which is, you know, abhorrent when you had no thought of doing it, but I'd use that manipulative card. You know, I'd owe people money, sort of loan sharks and what have you. I'd say, if you don't borrow me the money, people look around the house. And I'd use that as a threat to others to feed my addiction. And, you know, that's, not good. So
if you sat here today, spoke to you 10, 11, 12 years ago, what would you say to that person?
What would I say? First of all, I would say go to AA. I know a lot of people say I'm sort of outed myself here, you know, because it's the anonymous nature, but this is my story, and that's what I'd say. Just get yourself to AA, because that was, for me, changed my life. Being in a group of people who understand, who have been on that similar journey, and they're practicing a program, the 12-step. I don't know if you know much about the 12-step program, but it's a program of honesty, about helping others, about it just transforms who you are as a person. But I think the biggest thing is that group support we need, because with addiction, the opposite is connection. It's what we need. When we're in addiction, the addict within us wants us to isolate. It wants us to be on our own, because we'll just talk ourselves into doing it, because our best thinking got us into addiction. So to get out of addiction, we need to have other people around us, be it a therapist, be it a group, be it, you know, our peers. So yeah, that's what I'd say. stop drinking and get to AA.
Yeah. I feel like when people are in their lowest, we always feel like, because I've been in some bad times myself, you feel like the solution is some really complicated, hard, and it is a hard road ahead, but the first step is just a step. So if the step is speak up, the step is go to a group that can support you, then you can do that. So this is speaking to listeners who may be struggling. The first thing you have to do isn't overcome your addiction, isn't overcome your struggles. Your first step is just take the first step, speak up and get the help that you need, and then look to take the second step. Don't think about the destination, just start the journey. And I think that's something that we've learned from numerous guests that we've had on, is the key thing on all messages has been speak, talk. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a professional in the first instance. Explain to someone who has your best interests at heart, or you feel has your best interests at heart, and then take the next step, because the anxiety and the pressure that comes out off your chest from doing that might give you that break in time to then make a more rational and positive decision for your future.
Brilliantly said, Lewis, because again, I say to clients, when you feel like using, just tell someone, because you're grassing yourself up. Because once you get it off your chest, you take the power away, because you've got it out of yourself. Because as I say, if we try to convince ourselves we won't do it through our own mental willpower, it just doesn't work. So I think, like you say, it's about having the strength just to share it with someone. I think this is why I admire what you've set up here, because there's so many people I was in rehab with. I think there was a group of 20 of us. I'd say there's 3 of us who got clean, got sober. Majority died, unfortunately, suicide or, cirrhosis of the liver, something to do with alcohol. And, it's just so sad. It really is. Some lovely people that I've met. Even I've had friends back home who've unfortunately, took their own lives. And this is why I think it's brilliant to promote more, awareness like you guys are doing, which, I really take my hat off to you.
Thanks, man.
No, I mean, Lou, you made a good point before. I mean, James our guest last week, he referenced a story, a boy and his horse were in the woods, and it was really foggy and they couldn't see where they were going. And the boy got confused and he was worried, and he spoke to his horse and said, I don't know where to go, what to do. And the horse said, well, can you see your next step in front of you?
Yeah.
And he went, yeah. And he said, well, take it. And then you can see your next step in front of you, you can take that. That was quite a strong message, similar to what you're saying, Nathan, and what Lewis touched on. I mean, Nathan, do you have outlets even now? Obviously, I know you mentioned AA was an avenue you've went down, and unfortunately, not everyone had the same success in their personal life and obviously professional life now, which obviously you continue to thrive with. But do you have an outlet now, or is it, as long as it's not going too personal, do you still go to meetings, or is it your family members? Who do you lean on now when things might be tough or it is a dark day?
So I think now since I've been doing my inner child work and I've become a full-time therapist, I don't go to meetings anymore, because I just changed my view on, I think meetings are brilliant. I used to do 3 a week, kept me got me to where I am, always be grateful. But my outlook on addiction's completely changed since I've been in recovery. I think it's a holistic approach. Exercise, absolutely imperative. I think I took it to the extreme. I like running marathons, so I like training. I like the structure of it. So
mate, that's a completely different level of mental that we're talking about here. We're talking about addiction now. You're talking about someone who's crazy running marathons. That's like next level.
It's just something I was determined to get under 3 hours for a marathon. So I trained hard, then managed to do it. And ever since then, I've just thrown myself. Exercise is one, eating well, because I'm a bugger for chocolate. When I start eating crap, I'll be eating chocolate, KFC, Chinese. It just goes down the pan. But
KFC, please feel free to sponsor the podcast at any time if you want to.
Yes, I live at 49 such and such road in North Shields. Send all products. Yeah, I'll try it out. Sorry.
I think the key thing, though, Ethan, is connecting with people. Now I'm married, got a young child, but more present now with family. You know, I've got good friends, but it's the job that does it for me. You know, I see so many clients each week, and I do see clients who occasionally can't afford it. I'll because it's not about the money for me. I'm happy to work with anyone if they're really struggling and they can't afford therapy. Then I will see them, because it's I wouldn't be in this position now without my recovery. So it's for me, it would be the exercise, diet, crucial, but it's got to be connection. Really has, because again, total opposite. It's the antithesis of addiction.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate opening up. And when you mentioned there, sort of your fitness, by the way, 3 hours, top drawer that mate, by the way.
Incredible.
I'm out of breath just listening to you talk about that. Not that I'm not out of breath most times anyway, to be fair. You know, but Lewis actually did a great thing a couple of years ago. Lewis and a couple of lads, I was involved, and they set up a football team, a Sunday football team, because Lewis actually used to play for Plymouth Argyle when he was younger.
You're a prick.
So he's been through the academy. He's been through the academy. He's done it all, been there. But he wanted to help, like a lot of our lads, and you know, you could tell that people didn't really want to play Saturday football because it's a different mentality.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of money in lower league football now that sort of is ruining the game or such. So Lewis started his own, him and a couple of lads started a football team, and it's been such a fantastic avenue for a lot of men. And you know, Lewis is not so much involved now, but he's coming back into it, aren't you, Lou? Gonna get back into it.
Yeah.
But you know, he says that convincingly. But you know, it just shows how important sport is, because we went from we were having trials in the summer. We say trials, and anyone who came joined the team. Just ask Dean. You know, he plays football now. But you know, it's so important, and we've actually had people from the football team reach out on the back of the podcast as well. Obviously, I'll not name names, things like that. But they're saying how the football impacted their life, having the ability to go train on a Wednesday. You know, not many Sunday teams train at all, and we actually just make the effort to go. And even if we have a kickabout, we'll have a 10 aside, 11 aside, we'll have a laugh. You know, Lewis is encouraging, the boys are all encouraging. So I think exercise is so overlooked, and you don't have to be you don't have to run marathons in under 3 hours. No. You don't have to be sort of the skinny with it. You know, you don't have to be even particularly in shape. You know, like I say, I was pushing 30 stone when I was playing, and I just enjoyed the banter and the crack, and it's so beneficial. You know, so I totally see where you're coming from, and I would encourage anyone listening, you know, to go out even for a walk, get a coffee, get your steps in, anything than just sitting in the house, you know, feeling sorry for yourself. And